To create a Turnitin assignment, we will start by clicking on Create Learning Activity. From the options, we will choose Turnitin Assignment 2. You'll start by giving it a name. And summary is where you will give a description of the assignment. The default submission type is a file upload. If you would like them to enter into a text field, you can also choose text submission or any submission type if you don't mind file upload or text submission. For your grading purposes, they will effectively look the same. You can choose number of parts. Turnitin assignments can allow multiple parts. The parts can also have separate due dates, but the rest of the settings will be the same for all the parts. Maximum file size, this is the default largest size, so you might as well just leave it to this. Allow submissions of any type, yes or no. You can set a specific type. Display similarity reports to students, the default is yes. This way students can see what their similarity type is, and if it is really high, they can resubmit if you've allowed for that. Show grades as a fraction is the default. You can also show it as a percentage. So even if you have the grade as 20 and they got an 18 out of 20, it would display that as the percentage that is rather than 18 out of 20. Next, grade. Grade is where you put the maximum grade for the entire assignment. So if it is again out of 20, you would put 20. The next category is assignment part. This is where you would set the actual parts. You would set the start date. This is when they can see the assignment and start submitting. Due date. This is when the assignment is due. The default is a hard limit. You can change it to a soft limit under one of the other settings. What that means is a hard limit means papers cannot be submitted after this date. A soft limit means they can be submitted after the date, but under the submission area, it would highlight them as red text to denote that it was submitted after the due date. This way, you can mark off points yourself if you would like for a late submission, but still allow them to submit late. Post date. What post date means is when it posts the feedback that you give and the grade. Students cannot see the feedback or the grade until after the post date. So if you would like to give yourself time so that all students can see that at the same time, you can set that as a later date. If you don't mind them to see them as you grade them, then you can just leave it as the same as the due date, which is the default. This is where you would set the grades per section. So for instance, if you have 2 parts and you want the first part to be worth 5 points out of the 20 total, or the second part would be 15 out of that. Similarity report. This is where you set whether or not the due date is a hard limit, which is the default, or you can change it to yes and let it be the soft limit as I discussed before. Store student papers. If this is the final draft, you can change this to yes. If it is not the final draft, and they are going to submit a final draft later, I would recommend not storing them, because if you store the non-final draft, it will compare the final draft against that one later. Check against stored student papers, yes or no. Check against the internet, check against journals, periodicals, and publications. So these are all the defaults, and those are the things you would generally want to check against. Exclude bibliography, it will ignore the bibliography. So if you were having them submit an annotated bibliography, you would want this to be set to no, otherwise it will ignore the entire bibliography. Exclude quoted material. The reason you may want to do this is because quoted material should, by default, be cited. The reason you may want to change this to no is that you want to see if the citations for the quoted material are correct. This will generate a much higher similarity report, so do not let that freak you out, as that would be normal for this setting. Exclude small matches. What this does is you can exclude small matches by words or percent, so say 5 words. So anything that is 5 words or less, it will ignore, because often, even when paraphrasing, this is not that big of a deal if you want, or it can accidentally pick up basic phrases that may have been in a completely unrelated source material, just because those small collections of words may have appeared over and over and over. Grade mark options. This is where you can set up a rubric and also choose whether or not students and yourself have access to the grammar check function in the feedback studio. Once done, you would click on Save and Return to Course. And that is how you create a Turnitin assignment.